It's Freedom Bros. This is episode 23, and I'm really excited about this one. For those of you who don't know, I'm Freedom Bro number 1, Dustin Hurst. I am solo tonight because Greg is doing family stuff, and he hates that I schedule these on Mondays sometimes. That's my fault because I travel a bunch, and I'm on a plane, I think, somewhere, Nashville, DC. I don't know. I honestly, literally, the trips are starting to run together where I don't know where I'm at any point in time. I don't know. But here I am. I'm still here to serve you. Tonight, we are going to meet a 24-year-old man who's probably more accomplished than I am at 37, Colton Bennett. Colton is challenging one of the most liberal Republicans in the Idaho House of Representatives for her seat. And this is a race to watch because you have a young upstart who he seems to have all the right credentials. We will find out, against a very toxic left-wing Republican who she's got to go. She's got to go. So we're going to get to that. And we're also going to, Greg did not authorize this part, but he's not here and he can't stop me. And I don't have to answer my text while I'm on the show. We're going to talk about the drama with Brandon Durst in the West Bonner County School District and how it's hurting conservative candidates, or it could, if he doesn't man up and do the right thing right now. That's after Colton Bennett. But right now, we've got our way over the top stinger, and then we'll bring on Colton. So welcome to episode 23 of Freedom Bros. Oh, gets me every time. Especially the clip of Christy Zitto announcing her Senate run against Jeff Schroeder. If you haven't donated to Christy's campaign yet, go donate to Christy's campaign. She's fantastic. She's an angel. She's just go donate to her campaign or put up a sign in your yard if you live in the district. She is going to take out one of the most liberal Republican members of the Senate in Jeff Schroeder. But the House is filled with liberal Republicans, and they're largely women. It's kind of weird. Julie Yamamoto, Brittany Raybould, I'm supposed to call her, and up north, Lori McCann. Lori McCann is the vice chair of the House Education Committee, and she may or may not be a communist. I can't decide. But I know who can help us figure out if she's a communist or not. The man trying to take her spot in the next legislature. That man is with us tonight, Colton Bennett. Colton, welcome to Freedom Bros. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dustin. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. It is an honor to be here.
Now, let's address the obvious elephant in the room that I addressed, kind of mentioned earlier. I'm 37. I have accomplished literally nothing in my life besides raising 3 kids and not killing them, making sure they have food on the table. You seem to have accomplished a lot in your life at 24. You're like a veteran. You've got this stable career at a hospital. Holy cow, man. You're not too young to run for office, are you?
I wouldn't think so. And as I was before the show started, at 24, I'm older than at least the founding fathers when the nation was set into motion. I am. A lot of folks, they're out fresh out of college. They haven't really done anything with their life. I'm married. I have a baby on the way. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I've served overseas, deployed. I was promoted to sergeant and soldiers under me at the age of 22. So I definitely have skills that I can bring to the table. I'm not just some kid that's yearning for office. I genuinely care about the future of our country. I will tell you, you do hear comments from legislators who are looking at a job, and sometimes they talk about how toilsome, burdensome it is. And I actually have a quote from my opponent in this race. She said in an email to one of her constituents, and I quote,
Oh, I love this. I love where this is going.
I got maybe 4 hours of sleep every night in meetings at 7, never in bed before 1. We work extremely hard answering emails, reading bills, getting ready for debate, getting ready for public. So it sounds like the job for my opponent definitely weighs on her. And the more and more you look at that, the more and more you may be tempted to ask, maybe this is a young man's game.
I love that you're prepared right out of the chute for that. That's fantastic. Let me ask this. Why are you running? Besides the fact, let's set aside McCann's record for just a second, because we know it's bad, and we will go over that in just a second. But why do you want to be an Idaho state legislator?
Yeah, great. And it's the right question to ask. So I tell people all the time that I talk to, the reason I'm running is not about personalities. It's not about me. It's not about my opponent. Those are important. People want to know, why should I swap a horse in mid-game? And like you said, we'll get to that in just a moment. But the real question is that, do we have someone there that cares about the future of our republic? And Ronald Reagan said that freedom is only a generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the blood. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down for them to do the same. Or else, he warned, that we will spend sunset years telling our children's children what it was like in America when men were free. Now, I have a daughter on the way. The very last thing that I want to do is spend my sunset years telling her how we lost our republic. And I truly believe that at no time in our nation's history, not the darkest hours of Valley Forge, not the Civil War, not World War II, have we been closer to losing the nation that I love. And I'm not going to let that happen.
Well, let me ask you that, because I'm kind of a gloomy Gus when it comes to politics, because I've been in this game for 15 years. And I'm a little jaded and a little cynical. Are we not there? I mean, you brought up the revolution and the founding fathers and all that stuff. We are taxed way more than they ever were. We're taxed on our income. We're taxed on the sales we make, or on our houses, the stuff we buy. We're taxed on literally everything. They would tax our air if they could. In fact, they probably are with the carbon tax. Like, are we not there in a lost America?
Well, we're close. I would say that's why the urgency of my campaign, the urgency all across this country rising up. But I'll tell you what, we owe it to the founders that shed their blood and pledged their fortunes and their sacred honor to give it our best shot at righting the ship, even as we're going down. But I'll tell you, I'm hopeful. My campaign motto is reclaiming the hope. And I truly believe that we have a shot in the ship. If I didn't, I wouldn't be in race. Okay,
let's talk policy platform, because rhetoric is all fine and well, and there are some lawmakers who speak super well, and but they have some really crappy ideas. And there's one in the Senate, for example. He can figure out who he is later. What's your top issue if you get elected? What's your first thing that you're going to pursue?
So I usually talk about 3 issues that are important to me, and that's because not my number one issue is the number one issue, voters. But I will share with you personally, I had to pick, as far as valuing it, it would be the issue of the sanctity of life. I truly believe that if we don't have politicians that are willing to stand up and fight human beings that are being killed in this country, the unborn, that we don't have leaders at all. So my personal number one issue is certainly the right to life. But I also really like talking about taxation, fiscal response, and energy policy here in the state.
Energy policy. Now, yes. I know that you guys have a dam nearby and you've got a port and all that stuff. Is that why, or is there another reason?
When you think of the what the left, we need to go to clean energy, green energy, renewable energy. When you think of states that have renewable energy policy, You probably think of California, Massachusetts, someplace like that. But usually you don't think of Idaho. But the truth is 5% of Idaho's energy is renewable. 60% of Idaho's energy comes from hydroelectric, particularly with the dams.
Yep.
And you would think our friends who care about the environment, 60% clean energy, that's great.
Yep.
That's not what they say. They say the dams are a threat to salmon populations, and therefore they want to tear them down.
Yep.
That's preposterous. 60%.
Well, and our liberal
our energy comes from that.
Yeah, and our liberal second district congressman wants to help them, which is unbelievable that that's a thing that we have to deal with these days. But you make a good point. That's the cleanest of energy. So how are we going to replace that? Are we going to build some coal plants? Not going to allow that.
Well, that's interesting. How are we going to replace that? We talk to these people on the left. You really don't have an answer that you get from them. But what they have to do is that they're going to coat the rolling verdant hills of the Palouse with metal glass solar panels because that's good for the environment. And their second option is we're going to buy more oil from a Saudi prince. Instead of paying my neighbor to keep my lights on, I'm going to ship my money overseas. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it's a often overlooked topic in Idaho because we just don't have the energy issues that other states have. But when you were talking about California and all the New York and all the green policies, Texas has adopted some green policies, and they had a huge winter storm a couple years back that they weren't ready for, and they didn't have the grid ready for. And we're no different. We switch to green energy, we're screwed, and people die in their homes. That's where that leads. And I don't think they understand that, and I don't get why they don't get that.
Well, and I would kind of parse terms there a little bit, and I would appeal to my the more moderate section of the country, and even Democrats come November, is that the energy we produce from the hydroelectric here in Idaho, it's pretty environmentally sound. It's a wonderful thing that we have here, and to throw that away would just be a tragedy on every front, not just economically, but it's just a bad idea.
Right. Completely agree with you. Okay. Let's talk life. You said life is your number one issue. And for me, I'm a libertarian. I'm actually a registered libertarian.
Where?
It's a thing. It's funny because Greg and I are both very involved in Republican politics, and neither of us is a registered Republican, mostly because Brad Little is at the head of our party or that party and can't take a Democrat there. Anyway, life is an issue where I part with a lot of libertarians because I am very, very pro-life, and I think that that's absolutely worth protecting. We have pretty good laws in Idaho. Is there something that you would change, that you would update, that you would revise? Like, tell me what you would do with that part of your platform.
There is a long way to go on this. A long way to go on this. So, number one is the Idaho Supreme Court upheld our law by a vote of 3-2. That was incredibly close. It was one vote away from reversal. And here in the state of Idaho, those justices are elected and reelected on a rotating basis, and we have another election next year. That means that we are one election away from Idaho's pro-life law being out the door.
Right.
And having a liberal Supreme Court in the state interpret our Constitution as providing a right for abortion. There are a number of states that have got ahead of this. Alabama, West Virginia, Tennessee, a couple others that have enshrined into their Constitution a right to life. And I think Idaho should do that. We should move to do that. We should not leave this to always be hanging one election away from being overturned. So I think that's a great place to start. We also need to shore up our law that allow for abortion in a number of circumstances. I think we just need to say, in saving the life of a mother, it is never okay to kill an unborn human being.
What about, and this might get you in trouble, but somebody's going to ask you, so we might as well talk about it now. What about cases of rape and incest? Some people have said that's not That's not something we want to address, or that's not something that we want to force the mother to go through that traumatic experience. While others have said, well, you don't really punish somebody for a crime committed by somebody else. And I don't know if that applies in this situation. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Tom Sawyer?
Yes, it's been a while.
By Mark Twain. Yeah, there's a scene in that book where Tom is late for dinner, and he comes up, and his aunt's like, "Where have you been? Where have you been?" And he said, "Well, I was delayed because the steamboat coming up the river blew a cylinder head." And his aunt says, "That's terrible. Did anyone get hurt?" And Tom replies, "No, ma'am. Killed a slave, but nobody got hurt." And his aunt replies, "That's good, because sometimes people get hurt." And the underlying assumption there is this: in the face of that steamboat blowing a cylinder head, the assumption is that the black man isn't a human.
Right.
We make the same assumption when we talk about very tragic circumstances like rape and incest. We say, well, look at this terrible, terrible thing. And I agree, it's a horrible thing to mind around. This thing that happened to this woman, and now she's pregnant. You're going to make her undergo all this bad stuff? You hear a thread of sometimes people get in the background there, because the assumption is that that child in that mother's womb is not a human being, and that it's okay to kill it. And I would part ways, and I would say every life is precious. It doesn't matter the circumstances of our conception, whether we live 10 minutes or 10,000 years, every single life is precious. And it may not be but I'm going to stand up for every human life.
Now, I was trolling or perusing, I guess I should say, your Facebook account earlier in preparation for this. And I did see that you, as you mentioned, you have a daughter coming into this world next, I want to say January, which is super cool. I do not understand. I have 3 kids of my own. I do not understand how anybody can see those photographs from inside the womb and see and bring a child into this earth and then suggest that it's okay to kill one of those precious beings. I don't get that at all. So hopefully there can be more progress on pro-life legislation. I think that's a big deal. Do you guys have a name picked out yet?
We do, but it is a secret. It will go out on the birth announcement.
It better go out as like a campaign announcement. You better raise money off of it. So maybe that's what you do, is sell off naming rights to the biggest donor or something like that. But probably don't take advice on that from me. Your number 2 issue you said was taxes. Let's get into the weeds. What do you mean?
So property taxes is a big issue of all Idahoans. And the left has done a wonderful, terrible job. This issue is just a homeowner's issue. I don't own a home. I rent. But I pay property tax in a roundabout way because my landlord doesn't charity. He needs to make a profit. So when his property taxes go up, so does my rent. And so everybody, whether you rent or you own, pays either directly or indirectly property tax. And it has just got incredibly painful in the state of Idaho. And so I've called for a couple of things. I've called for expanding the homeowner's exemption. In the last decade, it's only gone up $5,000. It is not kept abreast of inflation. I've called for the legislature sets caps on how high the annual levy or increase in levy can be, and those caps need to be adjusted down. So that is the property tax issue. Another thing that we need to consider is the growth of our state government. The last session, our politicians grew state government by % through budget increases.
Right.
And every spending increase that a politician votes for is a tax cut you don't get.
Bingo.
And when we think about it like that and start realizing, oh, this may be a wonderful program, but we're using taxpayer money. Calvin Coolidge, one of my favorite presidents, he said, taxing more than absolutely necessary is nothing short of legalized robbery.
It's funny you say that, because I mean, everyone says that Idaho is so conservative because our legislature is like 83% Republican. It's like, oh, that's great, but that's far from the truth. And you bring up a good point. We have Medicaid expansion, where we pay for health care for able-bodied single adults who could probably afford it if they got even a part-time job. They could go on the Obamacare, subsidy exchange and get health care through that for like $10 a month. But they can't even do that. So we give it to them for free. It's insane that our legislature that claims to be so conservative still has that. Now, the question is for you, how do you combat that government growth? In the House, you're one of 70, and in the entire legislature, you're one of 105. How do you tackle that?
So there's a degree of being proactive and engaging your colleagues and working with them to say, because many of them have never thought about it like this. I've had conversations, and I've heard talk by my opponent. I just scratch my head sometimes and walk away, because honestly feel like there's sometimes, and not in my opponent specifically, but just generally among political figures, there's a civic illiteracy.
Yes.
And a lack of understanding of that money actually belongs to the tax. So I think engaging them and having a healthy debate is an appropriate avenue. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I have something that I can't control on the floor of the House, and that's my vote. And if it comes up and it's wasteful and it's not appropriate and it's not a proper use of taxpayer money, I'm just going to vote no. And if you get enough senators and representatives in there, then you're going to see things changing, because they're just going to get a haul of no votes on their bloated spending packages.
So let's shift gears for a second. Lori McCann is, let me see. Yeah, that's probably the second worst Republican in the entire House, because she's topped by Julie Yamamoto, who is the chair of the Education Committee, and Lori is second in command there. I would say single-handedly, but they had a hand in blocking education choice. Our schools are failing. They're not teaching kids how to read, write, and do math. They're not teaching kids how to keep up in the modern marketplace. They're not teaching kids actionable skills they need to keep up. And yet we keep funding them. In fact, got a little animated there. In fact, we keep giving them more money. So let me ask you this, Colton, where are you on education choice?
I'm 100% for it. I was recently having a conversation with Representative Alfieri from Coeur d'Alene, and he asked me, he said, "Where are you on school choice?" I said, it may cost me votes, but I'm never going to lie to someone to get their support. I think we need to have it. And I agree with Senator Herndon wholeheartedly. It's going to provide competition. And so the Constitution of the state of Idaho requires provide for the public education. I have no beef with that. I think that's wonderful. I think it's great that we have a system of public education here in the state of Idaho. But the question we need to ask when it comes to that is, what did you do with the last check we cut you? And so last fiscal year alone, the state of Idaho collected over $2 billion. Well, not the state. Taxing districts in the state cover $2 billion of property tax. A very large portion of this was spent on education. Then right. The session voted for $300 million more for education, because why not, right? And then at the end of the year, the governor found another $100 million surplus he wasn't expecting to have, and education got another $2 million check. Now, I'm not against giving money to education, as I said a minute ago. I think we need to start asking questions. When someone comes to us and says, "Are failing, we need more money," we need to ask, well, wait a minute. We just wrote you a $300 million, a $24 million, over the last decades of dollars worth of checks. What have you done? And I truly believe that by allowing school choice, allowing parents to move that money, whereas most appropriate to raise and educate their child, that it will instill a system of education. And this is a really really good issue about in my district. So my hometown of Moscow, 30% of students in Moscow are not in the public school system. And I'll tell you, their parents would really appreciate the opportunity to get a return on their tax money.
Yeah, no, and there are a couple points there that you raised. Really, really good segment there. The first is Idaho actually spends. It's funny, Wendy Horman, who I don't agree with on a lot of things, but actually we do agree on a lot of things. We part company on some things, but she's been like leading the charge for more money for schools. And finally, I think it was 2 sessions ago, she got up on the floor and she was like, guys, look, the math that you use for this is completely skewed. And you have to understand, as a percent of the state budget, Idaho is like 4th in giving to public education. It's amazing how much money we actually get. We give like 62-ish% of our entire state budget goes to K through 12 schools, community colleges, and higher education. The problem is Idaho is still a small state. Like, we are doing literally the best that we can. Now, liberals will say, oh, well, yeah, but you could do more. You could raise taxes on the wealthy. You could raise taxes on the middle class. That's what they want, right? That's what they tried to do. So we're doing a good job of funding our schools. And I would love to see teachers who are good teachers, effective teachers, making $100,000, $120,000, $130,000 a year. That'd be great. It'd be fantastic, because we would know how to measure them, but we don't have those measurements. And even if we do have measurements, but the union and the Education Inc. ignores that. It's fantastically awful. And to your other point, yes, it would be so great to give these families back their money that they're not getting use of. It's a travesty that we tax people for services that they absolutely will never use. And a lot of people would say, well, look, this is the price you pay for an educated society. It's like, well, we don't have one. So now can I have a refund? Like, that's wild. Let me ask you this. I want to get back on it. Yeah, I'm rambling now, but like, let's talk about like the actual form of school choice, because there's a lot of options out there. Are you in favor of an ESA or like a refundable tax credit? Have you thought through that? Is there one that's better than the other?
Yeah, I really like the ESA idea, but I'm willing to sit down and work with anybody to get something across the finish line. So I don't have one particular, that's my child. That's the one that I'm going to hang my hat on. But we need to do something, and the ESA is a great idea. It's been utilized by a lot of states, so there's a strong history that goes with that. So I think that's a great place to start and have the conversation, and probably an easier sell. But I'm willing to work with anybody to get something across the finish line.
Now, your opponent is somebody who opposes, and this is my least favorite turn of language that the liberals have come up with, but they say anybody who doesn't want explicit books in libraries, in kids, in like school libraries, public libraries, etc., that they are book banners, right? Are you one of the dreaded book banners who doesn't want kids having access to porn?
Well, I'll tell you, Dustin. I running for state representative isn't my first campaign. Before this, I ran for Latah County Library Board. Yeah, I'm up short. I live in a college community. Moscow's a college town. So we didn't quite get across the finish line, but we did run a very strong campaign. In fact, compared to the previous conservative candidate in an off-year election, increased conservative vote by 30%. Wow. And while I was running for libraries, one of the issues that I raised, and people would shoot back with, well, free speech. The issue is twofold. There are certain materials that are concerning to parents that are in, one, the kids section, and two, at taxpayer expense.
Yeah.
The concern in a free society, you can print and publish whatever you want, as you know. The issue here is that taxpayers are paying for it to be in the kids section. And having a conversation about that, about the kinds of literature we spend our money on, to me, it's just a fiscal responsibility thing. Why are we buying pieces of polarizing or trash literature with taxpayer money? And I think it's totally inappropriate. And I said so when I ran for library board.
So my favorite retort to that is, okay, you're not a book banner, right?
No, of course
not. Why
not.
don't you go, well, to them, I'd say, okay, so you think that you're not a book banner, then why don't you put Playboys in the kids section? Because they're inappropriate.
Yeah, they'd say there's absolutely no literary value to that. And as I was indoors around this district, a lot of people, their comeback would be, well, this stuff isn't in the children's section. And we're at the point where it's hard for people to say that anymore because the evidence has been so clearly illustrated. And I had a conversation with my opponent in which she told me, I agree, those wouldn't be there. So then the question becomes, well, what do you do about it? Where is leadership on this issue?
Well, and yeah, that's fascinating. She would say that because she's been pretty terrible on this issue. Let's talk. Okay, I know my other Freedom Bro is not here, but we have a duty to honor him and talk guns for a minute because that's a big deal to him. And I like guns too. In fact, with the Israeli stuff going on, like I'm gonna buy some more guns very, very soon.
Good for you.
Very, very soon. High-powered rifles. Anyway, where are you at on red flag laws? And for those who aren't initiated, a red flag law is basically there would be an alert system. So if somebody is having like a mental crisis, or if there's like some sort of threat that they've made, or they're going through some hardship, somebody could raise a red flag and say, hey, police, go take their guns before they hurt somebody. That's a red flag law in a very broad, vague nutshell. So where are you on red flag laws?
100% against them. And I'll tell you, you gave them a very, very characterization.
Oh, I really did.
You did. The truth of the matter is the Second Amendment protects our right to keep and bear arms. And that is a right given God. A gentleman that I follow, a figure in American society, he ran for the South, is Austin Peterson.
I love Austin Peterson.
I do. He said, you would have the right to keep and bear arms even if the Second Amendment were never written. And that's because it's a God-given right. The Second Amendment recognizes it, but we have that right to keep and bear arms. And so the question becomes, how do you, in a just and right and moral take someone's guns? How do you take their rights? And the only answer is through due process of law. That is the only answer. My neighbor's troubled, my neighbor's going to hurt himself, my neighbor's that is not due process of law. And I have the presumption of innocence. And so it is absolutely wrong to take somebody's God-given rights away without ever them speak on their defense in a courtroom. For let alone the presumption of innocence, they don't even have an opportunity to defend themselves. Red flag laws are an absolute no-go for me.
Well, and in the real trouble with them, obviously, is the no due process. Think about how easily this could be abused in the age of woke identity politics and like Jussie Smollett hoax crimes for attention, right? Like your neighbor could say, oh, I hate my neighbor today because of this, that, or the other, and say, oh, he did this, and like your guns would be gone like that. And then you have to pay an attorney thousands of dollars to get your guns back. This is actually a lot like civil asset forfeiture. It's like, hey,
which also against.
Oh, my heart is throbbing that you even know what that means.
So I have conversations with my police officer friends all the time. And I understand where they're coming from. You pull a car over and you've got rolls of cash covered in cocaine, and you're like, I know what's up, right? But the point is, with civil asset forfeiture, is you're taking away property. And I'm not talking about confiscating evidence. I'm all about that. Police have a right and an obligation to keep and preserve evidence until a trial. I'm talking about the permanent forfeiture of property, good money, vehicles, firearms, without ever giving someone a day in court. It's absolutely wrong. And it's just like the red flag laws. I believe in liberty, and liberty-loving people cannot support a government having the right to take away your rights without due process of law.
Yeah, civil asset forfeiture, again, for those who don't know, the idea of it, I'll probably be too generous in this explanation too, but the idea is that you should not profit from a crime that was committed. So if you're a drug dealer and you've just done your deal and you have these bags of cash, like, cops can take those and you're not profiting from your crime. But it's been widely abused. People who, the example, I think it was Representative Perry a couple years ago used, hey, I just sold a speedboat and the buyer wanted to pay in cash, so we have bags of cash. Those could be taken like that. And then you have to go pay an attorney, again, tens of thousands of dollars to get your money back. Well, if they only confiscated $5,000, are you really going to pay $10,000 or whatever it takes to get it back? No, it's highway robbery, literally by the government. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen.
And you have to add to that what are the professions that are most going to be carrying and doing their dealings in cash? Back to that presumption. It's typically going to be workers and laborers who do not have the time or money to hire an attorney, and that's wrong. That's taking advantage of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love this. Wow. Goodness gracious. I very few candidates know what civil asset forfeiture is, and far fewer understand why it's so damn bad for our society, for our state. What else let's talk about Medicaid. Let's talk about Medicaid and government welfare. We mentioned this earlier, but we have probably, I don't know the full number yet, but I know it's in excess of 400,000 people in our state on government healthcare. There are a lot of kids, but there are also single able-bodied adults. Now, if you say that you want to repeal Medicaid expansion, which we voted on a couple years ago, people say you want to throw people off their healthcare, take their healthcare away or whatever. Are you willing to repeal Medicaid expansion?
So I think that's, at this point in our state's political climate, that is not a fruitful pursuit. But I will tell you that what I do think is a fruitful pursuit is moving away from this idea of big bureaucratic insurance, whether that's government or private. And that's one of the reasons I'm really in favor of expanding the freedom surrounding direct primary care.
Right.
There's a couple of doctors that provide that here in my community, and they're very well liked by the community. I think for an individual, they charge like $90 a month, and they're considered. It's considered some of the best medical care around, and essentially have a monopoly. But with competition, that gets even more competitive. And so, without things like Medicaid, these programs, Medicaid, of course, is administered by the state. CHIP is another one. Social programs that are supposed to help people. There becomes a temptation from conservatives to say, let's just go in there and absolutely annihilate this form of government welfare. When a better idea is, let's change the social structure that allowed the demand for this to come into place to begin with. So, and let's be honest, government created the vacuum, and then they stepped in and said, well, we're the safe. So I don't think just going for the jugular on Medicaid is going to be a fruitful outcome. But I think we can head in the right direction on having freedom in healthcare by embracing concepts like direct primary care.
One of the big issues, we're going to shift topics abruptly because I have ADHD and I'm the host and I get to do things like this. Sorry. But one of the big topics in the legislature, but also in your hometown, is the University of Idaho's purchase or pending purchase of the University of Phoenix. I saw that. I was like, what the hell is going on?
I thought you were going to go down the Home Depot path, but that's another issue.
Wait a second. We'll get there in a second because I have no idea what you're talking about. Why do you approve of the University of Idaho purchasing the University of Phoenix?
So, and I've had great conversations with my friend Senator Foreman about this. It's not for it or against it. It's that we have no idea what's going on.
Yes.
Because of the secrecy that's so the governor has promised us that it's a deal. Well, I mean, thanks, I guess. But one of the things with such a major purchase like that is the legislature ought to at least be able to see what's so good about the deal. So it may be, I don't know, and I'm not going to comment out of ignorance, but oversight has just been kept completely in the dark in that regard. And that's the only thing that troubles me. When you tell me it's a really, really, really good deal, and then you proceed to spend tens of millions of dollars to close on it, I have questions. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. I have questions. And I think a number of conservatives are in the same boat.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, again, generally, as a libertarian, I am opposed to it. I think that, you're taking a private provider off of the marketplace and handing it over to the government. That's never a great idea. However, if they're going to do it, which it looks like they are, like, we need to be able to see exactly what you're doing. And this thing came out of literally nowhere. Like, it was like a Wednesday and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, we're buying this for $550 million. It's like, wait a second. You were just telling us in the legislative session, you are underpaid and you don't have enough money. And all of a sudden you have enough money to buy another university. Like,
it's all those surpluses. I'm telling you, Dustin, it's all those surpluses.
Yeah. It's probably ARPA money too. And I don't know. Who knows? But okay, before we're going to do the two final questions, but I want to know, what's the Home Depot thing? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so more of a city issue. So the University of Idaho had a tract of land that was sitting vacant years and years. They weren't using it. And so Idaho made a deal with the University of Idaho to rent that tract of land and establish here in Moscow. And a strong group of individuals hate that idea. They hate the idea called big business coming into town and putting out of business the hardware stores. I'm sure they're wonderful people, but their prices are very painful here in town. And so now, even though the university and Board of Education approved the deal, now a contingent of articles is lobbying the city council to vote down all zoning and building permits. And we have a city council election this year, and so that's become a hot button issue.
Oh gosh, is there a Home Depot in Pullman?
There is not. The nearest Home Depot is in Lewiston, which means much any extended building projects. Residents drive out of the county and spend their money out of the county. And so really by every reckoning, it's a great deal for the residents.
Yeah, it's you generate lots of taxes, lots of jobs. Goodness gracious, these people. Okay, this is my most important question because I've been watching the legislative process for a long time. I want to know how you operate as a legislator, not policy-wise, but how you think about this process. So let's say that you have your baby, like your piece of legislation that you've wanted to get across the finish line you've been working on it for 2 years, and Mike Moyle, the big bully of the House, comes up to you and says, "Hey, Representative Bennett, we are going to vote on this today, and we will give you the votes to pass if you trade your vote on this piece of crap legislation that we need. Say, I don't know, a free college program for Idaho high school students. Just as an example. Are you somebody who's willing to trade your vote?"
The answer is we need to know the difference between compromise and surrender. And so surrender is when you give in to your principle. It's when you have to come at night and have trouble sleeping with yourself because you know you wasted taxpayer money, you voted for something that wasn't good. Being able to compromise and broker a deal with someone it's maybe I didn't like that, but I can live with it. And so it completely, if it violates those basic principles or not. It does. Absolutely not. And I'll share with you a quick story that has been a guiding factor in my life. My municipal judge. And election time was coming up, and some individuals approached him. They said, Jim, things that we need you to make in a particular direction. And if you do this, you're not going to have to worry about re-election. And my grandpa threw those he said the judiciary is not for sale. And
Right.
as he was throwing them out, they said, Jim, if you do this, you'll never win an election. My grandpa said, it doesn't matter. And you know what? He never won another election. What he did keep is his liberty. My friend Senator Foreman, he asked me, he said, when you to Boise, Lord willing, if the voters entrust you with that, you're going to be in a suit and a tie. You're building, and very important people are going to be calling you representative. And they're going to come up to you and they're going to say, hey, keep your head down, young man. We need you to do this thing. And you're going to have to make a choice. And he said, can you cut it? And the answer is, if you can't come back from Boise with integrity, there's no reason to go in the first place.
Love it. That's fantastic. That's a really good line. You should use that more often. Goodness gracious. Okay, Colton Bennett, thank you so much for joining us. As a favor, you've done us a huge favor by coming on the show, explaining who you are, explaining your positions, answering some fun, maybe some tough questions. I don't know. But in exchange, you get to tell us how people can support your campaign, where they find information about you. Give us the full pitch.
Absolutely. This election is an incredibly important election. And so to all of your listeners that are out there tonight, if you're a time to consider pitching in and supporting a campaign, this is the one. Many of our conservative legislative proposals fell short this year by one, maybe two. So maybe your representative or senator is conservative, but there's lots of folks around the state that don't have conservative senators and representatives, and they go to Boise and vote on the same laws. And so if you want to see progress on conservative and liberty-minded principles, this is a race to put some money behind. And so you can learn more about me at my website, Ben Idaho, F-O-R, BennettForIdaho.com. You can visit my Twitter page. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Links are on the website. And if you know folks that have really bought into the liberty or the freedom movement or conservative values, send them my way. I'd love to talk to them. My phone number's on the website. Call me anytime, and I look forward to support.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun, and like I said, thanks for filling me in on and giving me your position on civil asset forfeiture and all the other positions. Sir, good luck on your race, and even more luck on the birth of your daughter. I hope everything goes really, really well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on. Honored to be here.
Have a good night.
You too.
Damn, that guy's good. Oh, my goodness, he's good. What 24-year-old knows what civil asset forfeiture is? I bet Lori McCann doesn't even know what civil asset forfeiture is. Goodness gracious, that guy. He's pretty dang sharp, guys. Now, Freedom Bros is, I say this every time, but we need to remind, for the lawyers, they tell me to do this, we need to remind the crowd, Lori McCann, you're not going to come on the show, and we both know you're not, but the offer is out there. If you want to come in and defend your liberal voting record, we would love to have you. It would be a hoot to hear you defend some of the votes that you've cast and some of the positions you've taken. You are more than willing to, or you're more than welcome to come on the show. So I hope you do. I really, really do. Now, moving on from Colton, that was a really good interview, by the way. I hope if you are so inclined, I would hope you would support his campaign. Now, let's talk about some tweets I sent last night. Twitter gets me in trouble. Sorry. And again, I don't know if Greg feels the same. Doesn't have to. But he's not here and he's not texted me yet. So I'm going to go full bore into this. Last night, I laid into Brandon Durst. Now, if you've been following the saga of Brandon Durst, I'm sorry that you've had to do that. But if you haven't, let's talk about this very, very quickly. So Brandon he ran for superintendent of public instruction as a Republican last year. He had been elected as a Democrat like a decade ago, somehow magically transformed into a Republican. I don't know. It's a thing to do these days. Donald Trump was once a Democrat, so who cares, right? I'm a libertarian. I'll probably be a Republican again someday, maybe, if they ever stop electing liberals as governors. But anyway, I digress. So Brandon, he ran a campaign, lost. Then he joined Idaho Freedom Foundation and Idaho Freedom Action, worked there for a little bit. And then he took a job as superintendent of public instruction at West Bonner County School District. Well, that set off a firestorm with the liberal community. And, okay, it's Education Inc. And they're saying, look, I don't want to give up my stronghold, right? They know what they've got and they don't want to give it up. It's a cash cow for them. It's a cash cow for the unions. It's their thing. Meanwhile, their school scores, their test scores, if you look at leadmap.org, are pathetic. Absolutely pathetic, right? So Brandon went in there with a promise to shake things up. That's cool. The concept of that was cool. But Brandon didn't have his ducks in a row. He wasn't properly licensed to have that job. He hadn't done a background check, which I guess he took care of. He didn't have his ducks in a row. And suddenly it became everybody else's mess and everybody else's fault, but not his. And for a while, the conservative community supported it because it was the traditional, well, he's over the target, so he's the good guy, right? Brandon was taking flack. He was the center of a recall campaign. Well, he wasn't the center of the recall. Excuse me. But two of the conservative trustees who put him into office were subject of a recall, and the recall was successful. The voters spoke, right? But okay, they're gone. They're out of office, I believe. I'm not well versed in the fine points of recall law. Sorry. Right now, the board is made up of 3 people: 2 liberals and 1 conservative. I was reading last week. I think it was late last week or early this week. I don't know. It's Monday, so it had to be last week. And that the conservative trustee, Troy something, has not shown up for work for a while. Now, he keeps saying it's personal business, and I don't know the exact reason he's not showing up for work. But here's my guess. My guess is that this is an orchestrated stunt to get Brandon to keep his job. But the voters have spoken, right? And I hate that. There are times when I would absolutely ignore voters. 100% absolutely ignore voters. For example, Medicaid expansion. Well, they were lied to. Voters were lied to by Luke Mayville and his band of cronies. Okay, that's a time that we can ignore the voters and repeal Medicaid expansion. Absolutely. I mean, and the legislature has ignored the voters before, by the way. It's a thing sometimes, right? They overturn term limits. It's a thing. You have to use it judiciously. Defending Brandon Durst's record in his career is not judiciously. So what's happening now, there's a story on KTVB and Idaho Statesman that says the local sheriff is now investigating this trustee because there's a section of Idaho law that says you can't just not do your job. It's insane what's going on up there. Now, I laid into Brandon yesterday on Twitter because I'm sick of the stunts. I'm sick of the shenanigans. I'm sick of this. Look, it was good in concept, but Brandon, you didn't have your ducks in a row. You want to go and conduct an operation like this and take over a school district and try some conservative ideas? I love it. I love the concept behind that. But you didn't have your ducks in a row. You didn't have your certification. You didn't have your background check was late, and like, I don't know if the dog ate your homework or whatever, but you didn't do it right. But of course, it wasn't his fault. He's the victim here, right? Now, what's going to happen if this doesn't end soon? And I called on Brandon to resign this week, and I hope he does. He probably won't, by the way. I called on him to resign this week because what's happening is, and I've talked to a couple bodies up in North Idaho to confirm this, so I'm not just talking out my butt, right? This is going to bleed over into other races, into other districts, into really important races, right? Scott Herndon, who we interviewed 2 episodes ago, has a monumental clash with Jim Woodward coming up. I don't know how involved Herndon was in the Durst thing. I don't think he was actually that involved. Everyone says he was. I don't think he was. But liberals don't work like that. They don't care about facts. They're going to blame this whole thing on Scott Herndon if we don't end it soon. Right? Scott gets blamed for Brandon Durst's antics. It's insane. And here's the thing that bugs me the most. Sometimes as conservatives, we say, oh, we're the party of the rule of law. Great. Somebody needs to be, right? Conservatives believe that law can bring order to a society as long as it's the least amount of law to ensure the most amount of freedom within a society. And there's a lot to be said about that. But the law says, Idaho law says, if you're a public official like that, you have to do your job. You have to show up for work. So this dude, Troy something or other, for Brandon Durst is going to end up with probably multiple misdemeanors. Now, of course, I know it's coming, right? Because the playbook is simple for Brandon at this point. The playbook says, well, just call everybody a liberal and say that you are the victim. Okay, but if I'm not mistaken, the conservative or the sheriff whose office is doing the investigating, he's a really conservative dude. I think it's Wheeler, right? He's not a liberal. And my guess is he's not going to let a liberal run rogue in his office. He knows how high profile this is. He gets it. But Brandon will say, oh, well, this is a liberal sheriff persecuting the only conservative on the school district board. No, Brandon. No, Brandon. The game is up, dude. You had a plan. It was a bad one. You weren't prepared. You didn't have your ducks in a row. You didn't. And the only person that can answer for that is you. I thought this was an interesting experiment. And I love the idea of a conservative takeover of a school district to show what conservative policies can do. And maybe you've done some good up there. I don't know. But the voters have spoken. The voters have spoken. And this time, you need to listen. Because you're doing damage to other candidates in the north for school district, city council up there. Other districts are being affected by your chaos. And you could possibly, it is within the realm of possibility, and it's not small odds, that you could cost the Senate and Senate conservatives a majority in the GOP caucus next year if you don't knock this off. Every once in a while, you've got to take an L. I've done it not 1,000. I've done it many times at IFF. I made some tactical errors that were huge. I can think of like 3 really, really big ones. Probably should have gotten fired for them. Thanks, Wayne. Huge errors. And sometimes you just have to take the L and admit that your best laid plans were not very good. Because that's what your team needs you to do. Your team need you to sit down and shut your pie hole and show a little bit of humility, just an ounce. Yeah, it's tough. You made a fool of yourself, Brandon. And I'm sorry, but you didn't have your ducks in a row. Go read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. The only person to blame for this chaos is you. And the reason I'm making this pitch right now and so passionate about this is there are lots of conservatives that I'm talking to right now who are working hard to make sure that good conservatives are elected into the Senate and the House next year. There are PACs that are working extra hours already to prepare for the coming onslaught. And the attacks are coming, by the way. I just got a text 10 minutes ago. There are new attacks on Chris Trakel. There are people who spent $47,000 on Chris Trakel, Brian Lenny, and Tammy Nichols a couple weeks ago. It's freaking September or October, whatever it is, guys. The shenanigans need to end. The shenanigans need to end, Brandon, because if we lose Scott Herndon because of you, and you'll never admit that, you will never have the humility to admit that. But if we lose Scott Herndon because of you, we could lose the entire Senate GOP caucus. And then what? Then do we just call everybody liberal and try again in 2026? Then we don't get to do school choice. We don't get to enact conservative tax policies. We don't get to look at welfare policies. We don't get to limit spending. Look, guys, I'm sorry that I'm so passionate about this at the end of our podcast, but there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of good work to make sure conservatives get elected. Brandon, look, we've had our differences in the past, buddy, and I know you're not a fan of me, and that's fine. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to take one for the team. I'm asking you to do the right thing, drop your pride, and resign. Stop the games. Stop the antics. Stop costing conservatives because you didn't have your ducks in a row. Now, final plea for you. I could be totally wrong. I'm not. But I could be completely wrong about all of this, Brandon. And I would love for you to come and explain how I'm wrong. You'd have to answer some tough questions. Why don't you come on the show and talk to me about it? Talk to Greg too. He'll be here, maybe. Unless it's on a Monday night. Come on the show and explain why you think that you can ignore West Bonner County School District voters. Why you think it's worth this guy, this trustee, getting misdemeanors because of you. Why the conservative candidates who have run really good races in Coeur d'Alene and other districts up there should suffer because of you. Why you think it's okay to risk Scott Herndon's Senate seat to save your career. You want to come explain that to me? So maybe I'll change my opinion. I would love that. You can't, because that's what you're doing. But you have an open invitation to come on the podcast and tell us why we're all wrong and we're all rhino liberals. But you won't. And we always wonder why conservatives never win. We don't have discipline. We don't have our ducks in a row. We work really hard. People donate lots of money and we put it to good use. And then we do stupid stuff. Guys, if you're still listening, thank you. I appreciate it. If you have any influence on Brandon at all, go urge him to resign. Go tell him it's time. The games are going to hurt us big time if they don't stop soon. And by the way, how we win and how we govern matter. It matters a lot. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to win, but I'm here to win the right way and to pull stunts and ignore the will of voters so that hopefully I can get past election day and then stall long enough to get the new trustee sworn in so I can keep my job. It's not it. It's not it, Brandon. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox here. In fact, I have to catch a flight in like 5 hours, 6 hours maybe. So it's gonna be a long night. But I appreciate all of you listening. Hopefully, I think soon we'll be able to get these back on Thursday nights. Yeah, there are some really big races coming up, and we've got some new announcements. Glenita Zeiderveld has announced. Tammy Nichols is going to announce soon. We'll get them on. If there's somebody you'd like to see us have on, we're trying to get all the candidates. We're inviting all, by the way, not just the conservatives, but because Greg and I are very conservative dudes, the liberals won't talk to us, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, I appreciate all of you for watching, and please make sure you like us on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Greg has been going off on Twitter with the Congressman Simpson thing. It's actually really funny. So make sure you go follow. I think it's Freedom Bros Pod, I think is what it is. If it's not, I'm sorry. But go follow us on Twitter because Greg's got some good tweets. Greg's thinking about running against Congressman Simpson, which is kind of fun. Go follow him, Greg A. Pruitt, at Greg A. Pruitt. We'll see if it happens. I think he has to be a Republican first. Maybe not this cycle, maybe next. But anyway, to end the show, of course, we will play our way over the top stinger. And I will thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you on the next episode of Freedom Bros. Have a good night, y'all.